Good evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you, board members, for changing this meeting. It's much appreciated. Today is the 27th of November, 2023. This is a special session it's a working session for the board for us to discuss some of the things that we've heard, some of the things we've done our research on, some of the things individually that have come up relative to the location of the new middle school. So before we go much farther, Ms. Hastings, would you take the roll of attendance?
I will. Ms. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Cotton?
Here.
Mr. Croto?
You
It's been a long day,
You can
guys.
call me Tom.
Mr. Croto?
Here.
Ms. Walsh?
Here.
Mr. Richards?
Here.
Ms. Higgins?
Here.
Mr. Weinberg?
Here.
Ms. Meeker?
Here.
And I am here.
Very good. We are all here. Excellent. And one thing I will say to start out with is that this is a board working session. So while we got great information at the last working session we were in, this one will be a much shorter presentation and a little more discussion on our part. Appreciate your cooperation on that. I would also like to thank everybody who has participated in the public hearings at RMS, at Millbrook, online, all the phone calls, all the emails, all the conversations that we've had with people with their input to help us, to figure out what we need to do and what's the best thing to do. Personally, can't speak for the rest of the board, but I'm going to look for the best decision to provide an opportunity for the best education for our students, all of our students, and the best solution for our taxpayers, all of our taxpayers. So with that, I will hand it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. I'd like to just move very quickly to our team from HMFH and have them do a very short presentation for you.
Great. Thank you very much. And that's the presentation.
Delivering on promises.
We wanted to talk about three things today from what we heard that the board was still looking for further information. We were able to get more information on the traffic study, so Holly's going to do a quick update on that. We have one slide on the water and sewer capacity. Again, just some updates on that from before. Both of these reports are uploaded online right now. And then finally, we just want to kind of, probably the most lengthy part of the conversation will just be walking through the site costs, because we were able to break them out by premiums per site. And we wanted to break it down and kind of walk through that slowly, just so you guys have a good understanding what those are. And we'll be here for questions.
So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the preliminary recommendations that came out of the traffic study. We do have our traffic engineers here tonight. We've got Jason Plord and Greg Bacos. They can answer any of your more detailed questions that come up. They did 2 rounds of observations, and there were also traffic counts that were performed. And the recommendations that came out of the study for South Street were separating bus traffic from parent and guardians, and providing longer student drop-off and queuing areas for parent drop-off. Both of these goals can be achieved by moving the school to the west side of the site. The other thing that we looked at was providing bus access from Cypress Street to the north. To do that, we would need to do some sliver widening at one intersection. We would need to install some no parking here to corner signs at 3 intersections, and then limit parking to the north and east sides of Cypress Street. The recommendations at Broken Ground primarily revolved around improving pedestrian access. So there were 6 intersections around Broken Ground that need some improvements, things like curb ramps or extending sidewalks for short sections. They also recommended adding centerline striping along South Curtisville Road, and installing a motion-activated LED stop sign at the intersection of Portsmouth Street and South Curtisville Road. And then finally, there was a need to further evaluate one intersection, which is the intersection of East Side Drive, and the 393 westbound ramp. So this is one of the eastbound ramp is signalized, so there's currently a traffic signal at that intersection, which allows traffic crossing kind of the travel path to exit, but there is no light at the westbound ramp. So the recommendation is that we would need to further evaluate that intersection to evaluate if a traffic signal is needed there. Like I said, Jason and Greg can answer any more detailed questions as we sort of.
So everything was pretty minor except for the signal. That was kind of the major takeaway.
On the improved pedestrian or actually all of the broken ground recommendations, would we have these same recommendations for the existing schools, or only if there's an addition?
That's a good question.
Can
I think, yeah, most of them they said would be for, existing conditions, right? They're just improvements on all the accessible routes, and so. Yeah.
I mean, more kids will walk as middle schoolers, would be my assumption, but parents probably walk the younger kids to school, so, yeah.
So could you just dig in a little bit about what improving pedestrian access actually means?
Sure, it's adding things like curb ramps. There are a lot of intersections that don't have a curb ramp. So there's a curb and then there's the road, right? So you need to be able to transition from the sidewalk, to the crosswalk. There was a small section of sidewalk that could be added along Portsmouth Street between, I think it's between, I forget the name of the cross street, but there's a small section of sidewalk that's missing, I think right where that yellow dot is.
Middle?
Along the north side of Portsmouth Street, which adding that small section of sidewalk would improve pedestrian access and get people across to Broken Ground Drive.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. And from my understanding, the motion-activated LED lights are already being implemented as a pilot program in the city, correct? And this is one of the areas under consideration.
Correct.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm just, are these expenses that we would incur, or are these the recommendations we would make to the city and they would have to make? Like, we can't, as a district, do curb cuts, right? Like,
Correct, they would have to be made with the city, and then it would be a negotiation on how much of that cost would be, put onto the project versus covered by the city. So you'll see in the spreadsheet when we bring it up that we've made an assumption about how much would be shared by each party, but that would be a negotiation.
I have some questions, if you don't mind. The infrastructure adds, I'm assuming you're looking at Concord paying its fair share of 10%?
Right, that was what I was just talking about. There will be a negotiation with the city, what that fair share is.
Have there been any conversations with the city so far?
I don't think any formal conversations.
No formal.
So we're assuming the city is going to agree to pick up 90% of the cost of this?
So with the recommendation, Jack might be able to.
Well, I mean, you put in 100%, are you assuming you're paying 100%? So
Well, it's
what we
the
did
same
is, we did that
pocket.
number based on the advice of our land attorney, who had said typically what he works with is what the percentage we would pick up, and 10% was that number.
Yeah.
So that's what we used.
And part of the 10% came, especially for the sewer project, it was, the sewer study shows that the school would only use 10% of the capacity of that sewer. So they would not be using a significant portion, so that 10% is where the recommendation came from.
Okay, so, well, in any event, it's still the taxpayers paying it. Because
Right.
it's the
Correct.
same
Right.
pocketbook.
Yeah.
And it actually would increase the cost if the city doesn't agree, another 2.7 million at the Broken Ground site, is that correct about that?
Yeah, we need to get to our spreadsheet. We just have one more slide.
All right, all right. Well, you mentioned the 10% and stuff, so I wanted to make sure we were being clear on that.
I'll walk
Okay.
through all of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. We just have one more slide and then we'll get to the spreadsheet.
So I can jump in if you want to.
Yeah, so the water sewer capacity study showed that there is not, the pressure isn't great over by Broken Ground, and the city has been looking at a boosted pressure zone for the Profile Avenue kind of area, which is the area highlighted in yellow. So they've been looking at that boosted pressure zone since, I think that was part of their 2010 master plan. But if that is done, there would be sufficient pressure for the school at Broken Ground. We still would need a fire pump, which we're including in our site costs. Sewer, there is capacity for the sewer from North Curtisville Road. And there is also capacity at the pump station, the East Concord Pump Station. The city is concerned about the aging infrastructure at the pump station, so they have been considering upgrading those aging pumps that are in the pump station.
Irregardless of this project.
Right.
Yeah, it's gonna happen eventually.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we are at the site comparisons side. Just going to zoom in a little bit, and we'll scroll up and down here. So taking it from the top, the demo cost at the existing South Street, when you built there, you would have to demo the existing building, along with some existing roadways and parking areas. So the demo of the existing building will run around 2.6 million, but the abatement of the building prior to demo is about 1.6 million. The phase two, if you recall from the last meeting, I took you through the additional 18 months of construction that would be required and the difficulty of the different phases for the the Runland Middle School site because of how tight it is, and it's an existing school right there. Those additional months would run a premium of around $3.1 million. The site prep cost, the Broken Ground site is a new site. So the premium, again, we're looking at premiums, so this isn't saying this is what the cost would be, this is saying this is the premium above and beyond what the other site would cost. So there's a premium for site preparation of around 1.1 million for the Broken Ground site. Wetlands protection, there are no wetlands on the Broken Ground site, there are wetlands on the Runlet site. There's estimated around $50,000 of protection. The basement infill, this is specific to the Runlet, has a large basement, so you're gonna have to bring in off-site soils to fill in that. So that's part of the site, so that's another $55,000. We estimated there's approximately $65,000 worth more of roads and parking at the Broken Ground site from our drawings. Again, the very preliminary drawings, but we're trying to do takeoffs from there. We moved to fields and outdoor classrooms. The outdoor classrooms, we were always showing there were 3 outdoor classrooms, so there was no difference there. Reconfiguring walking trails, we had committed that if you built on Broken Ground, that they would rework walking trails to connect trails of the existing paths. So that was estimated around $150,000. We estimated a new running track at the Broken Ground site because you would continue to use Memorial Track if you stayed at Runlet. But if you go to Broken Ground, we said we would need to build a new track. That's about $450,000. And then when we get to infrastructure costs, this is just purely looking at the amount of extra water lines that it would take because of where the connection was from the existing area at Broken Ground to where the new school was. It's estimated about $75,000 more. A fire pump, which Holly just mentioned, that would not be required at Runlet, but it would be required at Broken Ground, even with that booster station we'll talk about in a minute. The stormwater management was estimated about the same. Site electrical work would run out a $216,000 premium at Broken Ground. Again, a little bit newer of a site, so there's a little bit further travel distances. So that total, again, you can see that the majority of the costs are in demo and phasing. The premium would be about a $5.5 million for the Runlet site. If we scroll down a little bit more on the page, this is where we have what we're calling infrastructural allowances. Again, these are all our best guess at this point in time. And we try to use very conservative numbers. Traffic improvements, what Holly just spoke about, it was identified that a light might be required. Again, this is because there was the intersection showed a peak traffic flow that was around the similar time as one of the dismissals, so that they wanted to see would the traffic leaving the site impact that intersection should a new middle school be there? That's what they want to study further. If it shows no impact, there might not be traffic, but we wanted to carry $500,000 per the recommendation to cover those costs, which is a premium. The booster pressure zone on Profile Ave. So if we go back one slide, I just want to be really clear. This neighborhood in yellow is that area that they're looking to put a booster station on. This is, it's currently, the water pressure in this is already, under the static pressure is low. They need a plot of land in order to put a booster station. So when we're talking, as part of the negotiations, you could maybe do a land swap. But again, the 10% was running at a, what is a fair share of the school's use on the site, and how much water are you going to be using compared to all the residents, and you're solving a problem for the city by potentially give them land to put the booster station. You have that triangular shape of land right in front of broken ground. That might be a great location for it. So that's part of where what the 10% was including. And then looking at the East Concord pump station, we believe, $1 million to update the pumping station is probably very high. Our civil engineer didn't think it would get that high, but we wanted to make sure we carried a significant number just to cover our basis. So 10% again of that was determined that they said we would use approximately 10% of that sewer pumping station. So again, that seemed like a fair and reasonable price. And the last item here, Terrell Park field updates. When you move out of Runlet, you are going to be lacking in fields. Jack had some recent conversations and he can elaborate on them, but in order to provide fields for Runlet and the high school to use during the construction, there would be an update required at Terrell Park, most likely, in order for that to happen. It could be compounded further, my understanding, depending on what happens at Memorial Fields, and if they'll be under construction at the same time, which would compound things further, or how much they would be able to be used.
Is that the total cost or a percentage of the cost of updates?
That's half of what it would cost to put grass and some parking there.
Okay.
It's not the full cost of that project, but we
Is
would need-
Terrell the one by the
across from Carson Motors towards the dump.
Yeah, down.
Correct.
That's what she was asking.
Oh.
And the traffic signal, we're carrying at the full price for this, so that's the 500,000.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So traffic signal and Terrell, traffic signal is 100%. The booster and the pump station were at 10% based on estimated usage, and Terrell Park was at 50% based on a conversation.
Is the traffic signal a full price because it's on state land? It's a state road.
Again, we were just trying to be very conservative. You know, it was information that came from the traffic counts, so we didn't know how to estimate a fair share of the traffic.
Right.
We don't believe you guys should potentially pay full price for that, because it's a problem that's existing right now that was identified as, it's just happened to be one of the intersections that was being asked to be studied.
Right. No, I get it.
Can I ask a question, maybe of you?
Sure.
Probably of Jay, perhaps of you. With one, which is the middle school will use Memorial Field track. But after school every day, the high school uses Memorial Field track. When does the middle school use it? Is it only during away meets for the high school? Because otherwise they just run the fields.
Yeah, in my, I don't want to speak to Scott Owen, but usually there's, thank you. There's negotiation involved between the high school track coach and the middle school track coaches, and, they collaborate together to kind of map that out. I haven't talked to Scott directly about that, but I'm sure that's what happens.
I was gonna say, because you've been involved, I've been
Yeah,
involved in
right.
track. The middle school doesn't get to run on Memorial Field very much.
No, what typically happens is
That's a common,
they get out later, they get out at 3:30, so Concord High, we would start track practice 3 o'clock sharp. Get out of school at 2:40, get to the track.
Yep.
So by 4 o'clock, when the middle schoolers were coming down, because school had ended at 3:30, they changed, they would gather and come as a group.
Yep.
So by the time they came, and there's hundreds of them, we were done enough that we could, sort of move out of the way and they would come in. And And they also didn't come every day. Oftentimes, track practice at Runlet stays at Runlet.
Yep.
They do a lot of field things and that sort of thing.
Because they don't have access to the field for a variety of reasons.
Well, and
Yeah.
they can do a lot of the throwing and
Yep.
jumping events right there. So are you talking building a whole track facility or just like a recreational running track? Or a track that could utilize track meets?
I'm not sure. What do you,
But yeah,
What
what's
did you cost?
estimated is a track around, it's a full track that goes around like a practice field or a play field.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think it would be state competition, but you could probably hold middle school track meets there.
We were trying to
Surface?
keep it apples to apples, you
Yeah.
know, because
Yeah,
they
yeah.
have access to a track at the Runlet site.
So what I was asking is that it doesn't seem to be apples to apples since the current middle school doesn't really have access to the track, but
It
that's
would be a
okay.
bonus.
But they have a
It
track.
would be a bonus, it would be an,
Yeah.
it would be an
Two
extra
tracks in the
bonus.
city would not be a bad thing. Having said that, it's just that.
True. And it would be a benefit to that neighborhood over
Right.
there to have the track, but
Yeah.
it could come out.
And would that replace the existing track that's on the broken ground? I know it's not finished, but, or would that be additional?
So we went back after the last board meeting and we were insured, and we reconfigured everything to ensure that nothing from the elementary school space that's now is touched
Infringed, got it.
on both sites.
And that's
Thank-
like a walking path.
And that's a walking
kind of like a
path.
dirt
Correct.
path.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question with regards to the paving and roads. There's a differential there of 65,000. Does that include, I guess I'm looking at this configuration for broken ground, and does that include the configuration separates Abbott Downing away from the Runlet Middle School so that the kids aren't
No.
exposed to that traffic air? That's a big problem right now. 'Cause
No.
I saw one of your drawings, it looked
Yeah,
great. It
we
comes
did
down
that
the
for you.
outside and goes around.
Yeah, so that.
How much would that be?
I think that went from, I'm just going by length of queuing that we did, it was probably another 300, 400 feet, linear feet of parking, or not parking, of roadway.
Yeah.
So I don't honestly remember the differential to get the 75,000, but it would probably be pretty equal at that point.
Okay.
I would imagine.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead.
What's the
60.
premium with allowance for the broken ground site? We didn't list that.
For allowance, the broken ground sake. For which?
There's no total at the
Zero.
bottom.
So if you look at the
No.
total
It's
more
just
or
more,
less.
it's just the difference, that's
zero.
the difference.
That's the difference?
Yes, so this
Okay.
is 5.2.
But, okay, then, thank you for helping me understand this, because this is a lot.
It's a lot of.
Yeah,
It's a
sorry,
lot.
we were trying to make sure, we were trying to figure out the easiest way to do it by just providing premiums and going along.
And this is based on the 10% that I was speaking about earlier.
Correct.
Not the extra 90%
Sure.
that
Yes.
taxpayers would still be paying for, right? And so that really doesn't mean that there might not be any premium. It means that that's actually the broken ground site, when taxpayers are paying for it all, if I'm understanding this right, would be about 2.7 million higher.
No.
No?
Are
No,
you
because
saying
it would be 1.9 less 190.
So, I think,
Well, I get-
I know what you're saying, and let me, I
Yeah.
think I can answer your question. The East Concord pump station, they have to replace those pumps whether the school goes there or not. So
Okay.
the city will spend the money to do that no matter what.
Those are the water lines and pressure boosters?
That's the pump station for the sewer. The water
Okay.
lines for the pump station, they're currently working with a lower static pressure in that area, and it's working. However, if any further development happens in the area, they will have to incur that booster pump will be necessary.
And what about the electric upgrades and road improvements?
Those are purely, the infrastructure above the premium line are purely premiums that would happen on the broken ground, if you build on broken ground.
And where is the price for that in here?
So right above the premium line, it says infrastructure, water lines, fire pumps, stormwater, and site electrical work,
And that's the 790 altogether?
391.
91. Oh. Oh, one interest, okay. All right.
So anything infrastructure is related just to the project. So So like the electrical, if you can imagine, like we're building a whole new roadway to get into that site, so there needs to be lights on that roadway versus Runlet's already got electrical on the site, so we would just connect to that. So-
And all of that's only 391,000 more?
Correct. For that, as a premium. And part of that is just locating the building, even though it's further back on the site, the water lines, we're able to pull off of that. the
North
loop
Curtisville.
On North Curtisville, so it's not a significant distance to get to the school. So a lot, and even the sewer, we pull off the sewer from that area. So originally, we thought we might have to come off of Portsmouth Street, which would have been a significant cost increase, because we would have been going all the way up the driveway. But since we're able to connect from that loop, the length of travel for those infrastructure upgrades are significantly less than originally thought.
And finally, on this topic, have there been conversations with the city?
There have not, I had no formal conversation with the city that I'm aware of that.
So we did they have on Thursdays, you set up for meetings, the design, was it design
Development
development?
review. Yep.
Review, and what happens is all the departments. So we went in front of them twice to get their feedback. Some of that has been incorporated into here. And then any reports that I could share with the city to give us a little bit more insight, I've shared and waiting for any feedback that we might receive.
And have you received any feedback?
No.
So, okay. So we don't know really how the city feels about the cost associated with this project being at Broken Ground?
No.
Okay.
Lots of questions.
Boy, I mean, let's go around this way. Go ahead, Mr. Cobb.
Okay, just a quick one. Stormwater, you indicate same for both sites. I just was wondering whether that, given that there's a wetland area on Runlet, that doesn't impact the stormwater cost, you don't think?
Now, unfortunately, you can't discharge into an active wetland.
Right.
So you have to manage all the stormwater on site. It doesn't, so the wetlands, they don't help in that manner. You have to protect them. But you
I was
can't-
thinking that they would hurt, actually,
They-
because it's already wet.
Yeah, because you have to treat all your water. You can't discharge
Okay.
into wetlands.
It's sort of based on your pervious or impervious area. You'd have to, create the stormwater for that. So it's gonna be about the same on each site, same amount of parking, roadways, roughly.
Okay,
So,
all right, thank you.
Roof area.
Mr. Croto?
So, at the great risk of questioning people who are much more astute about all of this, we know that we had a water main break down around the Runlet Middle School and Abbott Downing not too long ago. Talk at that point was that the infrastructure there was pretty old. Is there really, I just have to have you reiterate that there's really no change in cost for site electrical work to go up to a building that was first initiated in 1950-something, and sewer and water?
So these are just premiums, so there are costs that would be associated with site electrical, but the premium to do it at Broken Ground is more than it would be.
Gotcha.
So yes, there are.
But you did you calculate improvement of the water that lines, like the ones we just had a break that closed the schools? Did you factor
That
anything
was
else?
not-
or
that was not factored
Nothing
in.
factored into to the current South Street site?
No.
I mean, you
Thank you.
always run the risk, right? Once you start excavating and looking for things, potentially, you might find things that need to be fixed, and contingency would have to be carried for either site for those types of things. Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Meeker?
Yes, I have some questions about the demo, which is, number one, I guess we're working from the assumption that if we go with the Broken Ground site, that we're just not gonna demo the current middle school, which I'm wondering if that's reasonable, given what we've described in our state aid application as a building that really isn't working anymore. We've sort of let the HVAC go. We're currently working on heating and cooling and, piecing it together with duct tape, so I imagine it's a building that maybe needs to come down anyway, so I'm curious why that is a premium. Secondly, it brings up a question about building aid, which I apologize, I don't understand a ton about building aid yet. But if we demo the school in order to build a new one, will a portion of it be covered by state aid? And if we don't demo it as part of the Broken Ground project, are we then responsible for the full cost of demo if and when that may happen?
Good questions.
Easy enough?
Regarding the premium, we don't know the future of Runlet, so we couldn't, we can't predict that. That would be a future board, or this board would have to make at some point. But we did know that if we build a school on Runlet, it has to come down, so that's why it was treated as a premium. I might pass to Holly on the building aid if you know that answer about whether demo is included in that.
Yeah, I believe it would be covered as part of the building aid.
Yeah, they're only gonna give us a chunk
Yeah.
Correct.
based on the total, so whatever we wind up spending that on, that's our discretion. So yeah, if demo is included in the overall price tag, then yeah, that,
Then
whatever,
they'll
I think
cover
it's
a percentage of
70
that
or
cost.
something, yeah, yeah. It's all just, they hand you the big pot of money and they're like, go with God.
Right. And building aid is capped. Building aid is capped. There's a square foot cap that's part of the DOE, and we know that we would most likely be over that cap. Our original estimate, we were over the DOE cap, so.
Okay.
Questions? Good question. Taking a look at prior history, we haven't demoed Eastman.
Nope, still
No.
stands.
We didn't demo Walker.
Walker,
We didn't demo Dane.
this building.
Nope.
We didn't demo this building.
Or Rumford.
Or
we didn't
Rumford.
demo
Rumford's still in its original state.
We did demo
Beautiful
Kimball.
Mm-hmm.
We did we demo? We demoed Conan. And it was because they were required for the construction.
Right.
So we assume a similar.
Right.
So can I build off of your question asking? If, and this is very big ifs, nobody get mad at me. If we build at Broken Ground and Runlet is not raised, which is what I was under the impression was going to happen, that we were going to knock it down no matter what, but I have since been corrected. What does the district think we want to do with that building? Are we intending to, because what I was told is, well, it's not really appropriate for children, but adults can do whatever they want. So are we intending to put Runlet up for sale? Are we intending to keep it for future SAU needs? Like, I would love to know what our thoughts are on that. Just gonna put you right in that spotlight, Jack.
Take that, and then I will start, and then I will let Jack. I'll
Some
let
of which
Jack do
you
the
all
history,
remember.
but clearly, that's a board decision, and, there are multiple, we've heard from folks in the community with ideas about what we might do. So, from demoing it to just so there can be additional field space for children to play and for the community to use, we've heard it to be other facilities that perhaps the city might be interested in, so, but that clearly is gonna be a decision and a discussion, just like tonight, for you to contemplate and to come up with as a board.
Or for people 5 years from now.
Right.
Or 10 years from now.
When the building is actually built.
Yeah.
But it's a good
Or the
question,
five.
it's one that you're going to have to, I don't
Address.
think it will be 5 years, but perhaps it will be, but it will be one that you have to discuss. You have to decide what to do with it, you just can't leave it there.
I mean, that's the full ticket, right? That's really what we're looking at when we're looking at the comparisons of these two costs.
Right.
Is the demolition and ultimately phasing. Those are the big money items. Everything else just feels ticky-tacky. So if the potential is to raise Runlet eventually, regardless, we're still looking at spending $4.4 million later on down the road, and it's gonna be more, right?
But just to clarify, I mean, there has been discussion in the past of selling it. Just to put it out there.
Right.
So,
Well-
I mean, it's not at all clear. I don't think that the answer is raising it. I mean, there's also been discussion that it would be used by CRTC, for example. So,
Right, yeah, that's what I mean, it's like, what
Um,
does the district have a vision that Or just say, no, board stuff.
I only go based off of the history. When we did the elementary, there were 3 task forces. There was an educational purpose, then there was a second one, which was renovate, build new, and then the third is what to do with the buildings that we were vacating. All of those buildings had some type of active reuse within 12 to 15 months after that was done.
Yeah.
I see the same thing happening. You make a decision on where the school goes. If it goes to broken ground, then the work has to start. Obviously, you still need the building, so we're not tearing down, we're not bulldozing around kids. That building has to stay active for another 3 to 5 years, depending.
Yeah.
And then there is a community forum to decide what to do with that. Very similar with the sessions we had for the third session on what to do with the vacated buildings when we did.
Awesome, that's the answer. I
So
was
that's the what I see
Yeah.
it happening.
Great, thank you.
And I would just make the argument, though, that visually, it looks expensive. On one, you know, we've got this $4 million premium because we have to knock down the building. But if we keep the building, we have to maintain the building. And we have, you know, like, there are costs associated with not knocking down a building.
Yeah, but I get that, but when they're trying to do an apples to apples
Abs-
comparison, and that is
That's
a
what it is.
legitimate thing to include and discuss because if we do build there, we're going to have to pay that money, where
Yeah,
if we
no matter
don't, we may or may not.
Yeah, it's hard. Go ahead.
If I read the reports correctly, it indicated that the number of bus-eligible students might increase by 20% or so, and, on the Portsmouth Street site. And I'm wondering how many additional buses and bus drivers would that mean for the district, and what is a rough cost, if you have that, Jack?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was that for adding? I think we proposed adding 2 buses.
Is that 2 buses?
Yeah.
Okay, so those are how much each?
They're 125 a bus.
And then drivers, what is a typical driver all in with insurance?
With
and
bennies and everything, probably being 30-some thousand.
And is,
Go ahead.
and is that presuming that we're not changing the walking radius that we've talked about before? That's assuming the 1.5
No,
mile?
that was assuming that the radius would come down.
Would
'Cause I
come
think you
down.
gotta get to, I think we said a mile in order to be on that side of the bridge.
So
I
assuming
think
a
that
mile
was the number.
radius,
Yeah.
okay.
But does that also factor in the fact that buses won't be driving as far from, say, the wards 1, 2, and 3? I mean, we're adding additional
Well,
bars.
the cost of a bus is a
Gas
buck.
money?
Yeah, the cost of a bus.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're just taking that, we only know with what the kids we have now and be able to project
You're just saying
out.
that's a middle school number total?
Yeah.
Okay, good, thank you.
And so that was, like, you 2 buses and 2 drivers, you're thinking? A driver for each bus?
We'll take as many drivers as we can get, to be honest with you. So let's not cap it at 2, but they each do need a driver, yes. They're not gonna be autonomous.
And does that?
I don't think in the next 5 years.
And does that assume that all kids who are eligible to be bused are bused?
Yep.
I know the district would love it if more kids got
Boy,
on
that
the
would be,
bus.
right now, we don't,
Yeah, that's what
We
they
don't
had
come near
assumed.
that,
That's
right?
what we assumed, yeah.
Just as an example
Yeah.
of that, in the morning at Runlet, we have 19 buses that drop off students. In the afternoon, there's only 14. So, you know, it's numbers that are really hard to track because of, obviously, after-school activities, parent driving, parent pickup. So, you know, nailing a number down with that is really difficult. But we know that based on the numbers, we would need 2 buses for broken ground.
and that isn't in the site comparison, that isn't a cost comparison that's included in there?
That's not a building
It's
cost.
not a building cost, so it's not.
It's gonna be an operating
But it would be an
expense.
operating.
An operating.
That's correct.
And how long do we amortize the bus for? How
10
long does the
years.
bus last?
10 years.
10 years. So that's, you said 120, so it's 12,500 a year
Okay.
for each one. So you're talking roughly 25,000 plus 2 bus drivers if we need them, so that's another 60,000. So this would add another 85,000. Taking that differential from 5,225,000 down to 5,100,000. I can't do the math right now.
Right.
But that, if you wanted to compare and be fair, that would be the way to compare it. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Crowe.
So I was going to save this question for later, but as long as we're talking about buses. So this is probably a question for Mr. Richard, but I don't know if you've got enough longevity in the district really to be fair to you. So there's been questions from the public about kids wanting to leave the Runlet Middle School in the afternoon and go to a Memorial Field or go to the high school or go downtown. Do we have any sense at all of how many kids actually do that or participate with that? And I don't even know how we'd ever find out truly, except for just kind of being in the hallways and knowing things. Yeah, I mean, it's a legit question. People have asked it a couple of times. I just don't know how we could possibly get an answer.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm, outside at bus duty or, everyone exits, the same location, I don't get a sense of a ton of kids like walking to go head downtown to hang out and play. I really don't. I have no doubt there are several kids who, walk and head towards that area to kind of hang out. But again, I don't sense kids are leaving school to go down to Dos Amigos or a local business to hang out. In regards to Memorial Field, I mean, our kids are very busy, super involved in our sports programs, so I don't have a sense kids are going down to Memorial Park to hang out necessarily. They're busy in activities, and if they're not school related, they're outside of school related type things.
And Ms. Murphy, this could be a finite answer. What about kids going to the high school after school for any programs, or do we have any sort of sense of that?
I'm not aware of any youngsters that go over to the high school.
Do we have any students going to the high school for math or science, classes during the day? I know we've had in the past.
I'm aware of one right now. It could be two. I don't want to
Okay.
misspeak, but I know of at least one student who currently is taking math. That's a goal of something Superintendent Murphy and I are looking to see that increase down the road. But again, right now it's one.
And I can add that I actually know a student who did that, and the parents had to drop them off, but they did get a bus ride back to the school. Go ahead, Mr. Lynn.
Thank you for that question, because I was curious about that too. For the broken ground premiums, I know in the site preparation there was discussion of endangered species. Is there a premium for the protection of any of the endangered species or biodiversity on the land?
The bats. They wanted to be nice to the bats.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the wildlife study didn't show any
It didn't.
concern
Okay.
in that area. There were some suggestions about tree clearing during a certain season to avoid
Bat
a
nesting.
bat.
That is-
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
The nesting.
Go ahead, Ms. Hastings.
As someone who taught at Broken Ground for a long time, and we did use those woods, and we did study the beavers that I understand are no longer there. I understand that the wildlife impact study identifies no special concerns with the BGS site, but I do think that seems fairly, superficial and might not be realistic. I think there will be wildlife impacts if we tear down a lot of woods, and animals will be unhomed. But it may not be endangered animals. I don't want us to think that I don't want us to put out there that we think there's no impact to wildlife. There will be.
Correct.
The recommendation was to keep any development kind of adjacent to the Millbrook Broken Ground School, which is what we've done.
I was just gonna ask Brenda, all the Concord Blues, those are over near the airport, right? Like the Sandy.
The what?
Concord Blues, the way.
Yes. We did have a Carner Blue, we did build a Carner Blue butterfly habitat right at the school. I don't know if it's still, I don't know if we ever attracted any, but I know we did build one. Third graders did that, I remember.
It's still a great project.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Ms. Hoover.
The phasing costs. It sounds like it's just going to cost more because it's going to take longer. So would you say that amount is just sort of, if you divided that by 2, it's like about $1.5 million a year to phase out a project? Is that where you guys got that number?
At this level, our estimators, that's essentially what they do. They track how long the contractors will have to be on site. However, we were able to give them that more detailed breakdown, which was more helpful. So you can see the adjacencies to the building, the potential shoring, that would have to happen for one building, how close is the other building, potential laydown requirements of a contractor. So I think that that's all factored into this latest round, but essentially it can be broken down by that.
Okay.
And obviously, when you get a contractor on board,
Mhm.
eventually they might be able to do a little better than that, potentially, you know.
Yeah, let's get those
us
deals.
taking-
Yeah.
Yeah. But there will be a cost, because they will be on site longer,
Mhm.
basically.
Yeah, thank you.
And just going back to the bus thing, you did not, this was actually suggested to me, that's a great question, made me think about it. We didn't include busing from the current Runlet site to Terrell Park. You guys didn't do that.
That was not.
So if I was factoring in
So let's check.
I should
That
probably
wasn't
factor
factored in
those
that
buses.
dollar amount, correct?
Yeah, and we put that down as an allowance because obviously if Runlet goes under, we're gonna have to figure out where the kids do PE and all. The reality of busing them over there, that discussion has to happen, but busing them to Terrell Park will probably be difficult within the time period of a PE period. We're probably looking at mostly after school and weekends, because not only are you gonna impact the school community, you impact the community in general, because there's other organizations that use those fields. So we allow that only because the city is looking at Terrell Park as they're gonna be pressure for you to say, we need to move that a little further, because that is in their capital plan into the future. Granted, more advanced than what would be a start to this, but are you gonna need to provide community space, fields?
I've heard a lot of suggestions that we could just move to Memorial or Rollins Park. My understanding is the fields at Memorial and Rollins are pretty much spoken for
Yeah.
and fully scheduled
Yes.
now,
And-
as well as Martin Field.
Yes, yep. So we're providing a list of all the things we would need, and we're trying to figure out a matrix with Parks and Rec on, okay, where would we go? Because if you take these fields off, okay, you still have Memorial, but if Memorial Field goes off as well, that's where the Terrell might be helpful to community organizations. I don't necessarily see during the day how it benefits the school, but after-school programs it may, but there will be busing costs, likely.
Well, one would have to assume, I mean, right now, the high school football team practices at Runlet.
Correct.
One would assume that if they could have practiced at Memorial, they would be. It's closer, it's
Yeah,
right
the back
there.
practice field where they used to
They,
practice is
they don't,
totally-
they practice, so
Yeah.
there must not be much field availability at
Right.
Memorial, if any,
It's
at all.
quality of the field.
Yeah.
That field sits empty, but it's,
But you can't use it. That doesn't help us in any way.
what about the athletic fields on Clinton Street? I know they're not public athletic fields, but there's,
Yeah, I did call them. They booked them out too.
they,
I have asked and they said that they would look into it, but they're
yeah, they.
pretty tidied up.
that's-
Yes.
They make good money.
Yeah.
But we could, if we had lead time, we could.
Yeah, I had told them this is probably at least a year or two out, in case anybody drops off, but living
And
next
that
to those
could be-
fields,
And if there was.
they're
time-
active.
Yeah, yeah, but if that could be a potential for, you might have to maneuver the daily schedule, but there could be outside PE there, because it's
Sure.
a 10-minute walk
Mhm.
from Runlet to those fields, so.
Go ahead, Mr. Coggan.
Maybe a,
Wasn't
I think I know the answer to the question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just to make sure everybody understands it, including me. And that is, we're talking about site comparison costs here. What we haven't talked about is the actual building of the school costs. Are there, we're assuming that we're building the same school on both sites, and it's going to cost the same on both sites. Is that really as simple as that? Or, I mean, I would think that, you know, given the differences in the sites, that even if you try to build the same building, there might be cost differences in trying to do that. Can you just talk about that a little bit? Sure.
I would say that the phasing costs that you're seeing here are maybe more of a reflection of what that additional building cost would be. At this early of a stage, you really are just working off square footage numbers. And since we're assuming they'll be the same at both sites, we would assume the same linear foot of foundation, the same, we've been using the same footprint for that matter. Sure, you could, squeeze it and go higher, and that's one way to reduce some of your, and we could look at all that, but we would assume that you can do that on both sites.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Go ahead.
One site cost that I was thinking of, if we were to go with the current Runlet site, how realistic is it that students would be able to continue working in that building while the new school is being built? And if it's not possible, would that include, did you put anything in here for modular classrooms, I guess is what I'm looking for?
So we did look at modular classrooms as, if we wanted to tear down the 6th grade wing and try to build the school over there, but it's just not large enough, it's not feasible. So we did look at some of those costs. However, right now, the closest, I guess, to the construction are the gym and more active spaces where, noise doesn't impact you as much. So that helps in this sense. But we did not look into any costs other than we can give you a cost for how much a modular would be if you determined you needed to put one on site.
But we don't know how many we would need.
Right.
We gave you that info.
Right.
Okay, what was the modular cost per?
Like $1 million.
It was
250 to 300.
Yeah, 250 to 300,000 per modular.
And how many
That's one
kids
classroom.
going?
Per
That's one
classroom.
classroom.
One
Well,
classroom.
modular is one classroom.
Correct. And that's because you have to, first you have to own them, but you have to plumb them, they have to meet all the codes, structural loads for our snow.
Foundations.
Foundations, things like
Fire
that.
protection.
Bathrooms?
Yes, it
That's-
depends
you'd
how
have
many you
to-
put out
You'd
there.
have to have
Yeah, once you get to a certain level.
$350,000 bathroom.
Yes.
Is it the gym that is closest to the
Yeah.
new school? So and that's what you ended up losing part of it, Oyster River toward the end?
Yes, I
That
mean, that's, and the architects know I brought that up a couple of times. I trust their judgment, but it just, how they have the site right now, it just makes me a little nervous because we were originally told that you're not gonna lose the gym, and then, our construction manager, told us, really sorry, but you are gonna lose your gym, and here's why, so. That's it.
There is a
Historic.
classroom wing
Yeah.
that is adjacent to where the school is going to, that has special education classrooms. There's I think a computer lab, and there's a science classroom. So there is a classroom wing that is adjacent to where the new school would be going. It's not just the gym.
I guess I just wondered, at 350,000 apiece, how far on that site could we move them to eliminate the noise? I mean, I just don't
I don't know
know.
if you could
As an
move it.
example,
Question I have is, similar to that, but would you be able to maintain the traffic? Like the drop-offs and all that stuff on an active construction site using the existing roads? Have you looked at that?
That's part of the phasing cost. It gets
Okay.
difficult because you're now, you're limiting when contractors can come in. We typically have hours contractors can't come in, which is during that. But you're talking about larger trucks coming on an already tight site. So that maneuvering is very difficult.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr.
Would the sustainability costs be the same? Obviously, we're not talking about the specific building yet, but could we build the same solar panels at each site, the geothermal wells, or are those limited by site?
No, we're saying for this exercise that you can do the same features at both.
Okay.
I mean, there may be more impact to the neighbors for, say, the geothermal wells at the South Street site because they'll be drilling in that location right next to the neighbors, but you can still put them in.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question? Have we considered light, one of the people who testified in a public hearing asked about light pollution, which would be a problem at both sites, right? Have we looked at that? I mean, we're gonna be 35 feet away from someone's property. And that building's gonna have to be lit throughout the night, at least to a certain degree. And parking lots, which are gonna be over on the, other side, are going to be lit throughout that. And then in broken ground, those whole things are gonna be lit. Have we looked at that at all?
So, per code, all site lighting has to have zero cutoffs, meaning you can't pollute the skylight and you can't trespass on anything other than your lawn. So you can't have 1 foot candle go beyond yours.
site property
So you'll
line.
have shields on all of your lights that direct the light down in a manner that will not allow light to trespass onto the neighbor's. Now, with a building 3 stories high, I think you were alluding to lights on in the building. There will be an hour at night when the building lights will go off. You could require shades to be pulled down if, at certain hours to prevent light going out. But that's light you would see, but it's not the light that's regulated by the code in terms of site lighting.
Okay, so there'd be shades so that if I was in that adjacent building, if the lights are on, it's gonna be blackout over there? No.
No.
It's gonna still be some light, but
Yeah.
we minimize it? I would encourage us to minimize that,
Yeah,
no matter which site we
I mean, it
pick.
depends what you're talking about, like if there's an event at the school at night, if there's a parents' night or something, the lights are gonna be on in the school. So in those cases, there would be light coming from the school. I think what Bobby's talking about is any site lighting, that's lighting pathways or roadways, all of that will have zero cutoffs. You can put that on a dimmer, you can put that on the BMS system to shut off at 9 o'clock every night, there's, no more light.
But there'd be a security issue, you'd have to leave something on because you're basically.
There's codes for that.
You do have building
Okay.
lights, there will be lights on the exterior building that will shine down, and they will not be powerful enough to shine in any kind of, so you can control where your cameras can see around the perimeter of your buildings, you'll be able to see that, but the site lighting is not controlled by that or regulated by that, so that can be turned off.
And Barb's right, it'll turn on. If you walk into a room, the lights can come up, so that will be part of the security package.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. One more. And just to confirm back to the infrastructure allowances, each of the numbers on the broken ground site, there are recommendations to do regardless of which site we select, correct?
The infrastructure.
Say that one more time.
They were recommendations from the traffic studies and such that regardless of the site that is chosen, those are upgrades that are recommended for the safety.
For broken ground.
For broken ground.
The ones on South Street were specifically due to relocating the bus drive through the new neighborhood to do drop-off.
No, yes, the broken ground ones. So regardless, if we were to choose the existing site, those would still be upgrades that would be needed at the broken ground site.
They're recommendations, so you would have
Recommendations.
to decide,
Got it.
what you thought, and then that's a conversation with the city too, right? Because-
Thank you.
So those curb cuts would serve our elementary school students?
Correct.
Okay.
They make them accessible, that's one piece is they're not ADA accessible, so curb cuts are required to be accessible. Existing ones, your grandfathered in, but any kind of new work, you're gonna wanna upgrade that, so that's why it's a recommendation, not a requirement.
So I'd like to bring something up that hasn't been discussed at all, but I think we need to think about it. And that's police and fire. So we have one police station in Concord, which is on this side of the river. Fire departments, we have Pennacook Fire Station, we have a fire station in the north end, right near Rite Aid. We have a fire station in the south end, and we have one fire station on the Heights. So right now, we have 3 fire stations that service all of the schools except Broken Ground and Millbrook. And the fire station on the Heights is close to there. We put a middle school up there, we're effectively taking a city full of children, putting it across a river in a location that is serviced by one fire station. Plus, there's all those housing going in, high-rise apartments. I bring this up because I have a couple of neighbors who are firefighters, and this wigs them out a bit, like where's the conversation around city infrastructure, police and fire, having, is this something, have we done an impact on what we might need to do or ask of the city to make sure our children are safe? I know that the traffic on the Heights is enough that West Side River fire stations go up there a lot. The one station there isn't big enough to handle every call that comes in from that neighborhood. So we haven't talked about it at all. I just think it's logical that this would be a communication we would have with the city on some level to address those.
There was a representative from the fire department in the development review meeting we had with the
good.
city. So they have been part of the conversation.
And did they raise any concerns?
Access is always the concern. I don't know if it was specifically raised in that meeting, but we did talk about, we will be providing a loop road around a school, no matter what site it's on, which gives them more access than they currently have now, and probably even better access to broken ground for even the Millbrook School and the Dame Eastman School, because you'd be able to go behind it. Not Dame, Broken Ground School. There's there's also the cul-de-sac of broken ground. We've talked about connecting that, so that loop road would be connected into the, it might not be an accessible drive, meaning you might have a gate that the fire department has access to, but it would be another way off the site, so that.
Emergency egress
Emergency
kind of
egress.
thing.
And then with Runlet Street, again, we're connecting, you're already connected to the other side, we have parking, which is Noyes Street over there, but that would also be connected into your fire lane and your fire loop, so that you would now have access on both sides of that. So I think no matter which option you're going to, we would significantly increase fire and safety access to a school and around the school.
And that I feel confident in. I'm just thinking about manpower. I'm talking about the number of firefighters, where they are in our city, and what their responsibilities are.
Do you remember we had a retired first responder came and testified at the Millbrook public hearing? I mean, his testimony was really powerful for me because as a person with young kids in school, I'm constantly thinking about their safety during the day. I know where all of their exits are. I know what their exit plan is, and my kiddos do not like doing drills because they're afraid to like get caught in the bathroom or something. It's very heavy conversation in our household. So when he came and testified and said, if you want swift access in the event of a crisis, he recommended the broken ground site. But I'm really glad that you brought this up because I would like to have that conversation, or at least hear from police and fire who are active, what they think would be the best spot.
Because I can see accessibility-wise, why broken ground might be easier to access. I get it. My thing was manpower.
Oh, I totally agree with you, and I think it's a worthy conversation to have. I'm glad you brought it up.
Especially with, if the mall development comes, and a huge amount of people living in a very small area. So police and fire responsibilities in that part of town will be exponential. I mean, I know we're not the city, so we don't hire the firefighters and the police officers. but-
No, it's- Although I just Google mapped and Central Fire Station is, it's about the same drive time to Broken Ground and Rutledge.
Oh, yeah.
So that would be the
That would be the
backup
backup.
for just, it's the backup for Broadway and it's the backup for,
Well, and the problem too, so many of our
Heights.
firefighters get called to things in our fires, and so
Yep.
you have.
Yeah, there are EMTs, there
Yes,
are first
out
responders.
all the time, so that's good to know. I mean, I know they have a plan and what.
yeah, no, but I think it's a good question. Were the police at the site development meeting?
I can't recall if they were at that meeting.
The people who are gonna show up first are gonna be firefighters.
Yeah, no, but if there's other
Oh, for sure.
incidents.
It would just be a worthy conversation, I
Yep.
think, to really get a handle on how the people in the uniforms feel themselves about it.
Interestingly, too, we had a personal experience with this, living near the Broken Ground site, not, about a month or so ago, where we did have to call 911 and request EMTs in 25 minutes, because the Heights EMTs were on other calls, and the EMTs that eventually came had to come from Broadway.
Right.
And it was a significant amount of time, and there was nothing they could do.
Right, and that's my issue, not how easy the building is to access, but we now have,
That's
700 more students on the other side of the river now.
And I mean,
So-
that's citywide, it's a
Right.
citywide
It's a
issue.
citywide
I know our
Because-
police have had a really difficult time finding enough officers to fill the positions that we have available, so I think that goes down, that's a much bigger conversation.
Yeah, it is.
Manpower is, as opposed to just, where the kids go to school.
Yeah.
Regardless,
Well, I
we
agree.
need more
I feel
people.
like
Exactly.
If the Broadway people were out on a response and something happened at Downing, they'd have to respond from the Heights.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a problem either way,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like traffic, it's something we gotta consider all the way around.
I was just gonna say that whatever we do, whatever decision we make, there's gonna be a ripple effect across our entire community. We're gonna have to then talk to the city and police and fire, parks, if that's our decision. It's a big decision, and it's impossible for all of us to solve all of those problems, particularly here tonight. We don't know what we're gonna do with Runlet if we don't tear it down. We don't know what we're gonna do with the land if we don't build on broken ground. I mean, we could be here all night, dreamscaping, what our
Well said.
our vision for the city, when really practically it's a big project that's gonna cost money and it's gonna be difficult to make changes no matter what we decide. So I feel like, we can certainly talk about it, but I understand the desire to keep it to these premiums, right? Like, this is what we understand, this is what we know. We're doing the best we can, but I feel like there's going to be a big ripple effect no matter what we choose, apples to apples,
Really good
regardless.
point.
So,
Other questions?
on that, no, just kidding.
I'm not.
Are we at the discussion point, or
I think
did we already begin the discussion?
We started, but I think it's where we go into more of our discussion, I would expect, for the things that we're concerned about and that we have heard and the things we want to share.
Yeah,
So, anybody want to start?
I don't mind.
Go ahead.
I offer myself as tribute. I'm really, really concerned about the amount of money that our city is planning on spending in various projects. This is not just about a middle school. We're talking about the Memorial Field improvement. There's golf course is requesting $10 million for a new clubhouse. Everett Arena, I've heard that there's plans to improve that site. Like, infrastructure in Concord does need to be updated. And those updates are going to come whether we like it or not, and it all comes out of the same pocket. As a homeowner here, and having watch my property taxes continue to climb steadily without a break, my real concern is, how are we being fiscally responsible with necessary infrastructure stuff? It really is going to come down to dollars and cents for me, because our family wants to stay here, and I know there's lots of folks who cannot afford to stay here if we continue to just rack up these bills. I'm a pretty progressive person. I want us to be able to have all the things that we want and to have the very best of everything for our kiddos, but you can't squeeze blood from a stone. We only have so much that we can pull from with as diverse a property tax base as we have. So the real thing that's going to lead my decision making is what is going to be the most affordable option for us while also meeting our obligations to our children's education.
Go ahead.
I definitely agree. Cost is one of the key factors, and I'm so looking forward to the next page where we talk about how we bring that cost down.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Jack, just for discussion purposes, can you say what the cost to a taxpayer would be if we amortize this in the premium in a bonds? Like, what's the difference?
Jack is smiling because
He already has the answer to my question.
Press is here, and I don't want to inaccurate that number, so I'll let you continue with the discussion while I pull that out.
But you understand what I'm
I know what
asking.
you're going to ask.
Give us a ball.
I'll give you the number
Even though I know you do
without
500
building
scenarios.
nothing, and yes, please give me a moment.
So, anyone else?
Like, I'm willing to question if we need a geothermal well. Like, is that really something that's essential to the school? In order for kiddos to get a good education? I think 176 million or 175 million for a middle school is a ridiculous price tag. There's all of the schools ahead of us, or the 17 districts that are asking for money from the state, they don't touch the numbers that we've offered. So I'm looking forward to trying to bring this cost down as much as possible.
Although in the geothermal well, we gotta balance
For sure.
operational costs and upfront costs.
Yes.
Short-term and long-term.
But
Yeah.
building on yours, here are my two big cost. Long-term usefulness and investment for the community. And I worry that at Runlet, we build and that's it. If our needs change, if our student population changes, we're stuck. I look at Krista McAuliffe, which I adore, but it is shoehorned onto this little site because of sentimentality at the time. And, so 1 year the kids don't have the library because they need that space for something else. Some years they don't have the tech room because they need that space for something else. And that doesn't happen at the schools that had a little more site. And I have said this before, and I will say it again. The other is the kids who will be at Runlet during construction are the kids who have already gotten a really raw deal in their education. They're going to be the kids who were in kindergarten, first, second grade during COVID. They're the kids that are the furthest behind now, and I worry about the disruption to their education. And I worry about that at Broken Ground too, and I want to make sure that we are sufficiently separating the buildings so that we are not disrupting the students at Broken Ground and Millbrook too. But, you know, those are my sort of three drivers is it going to work for the long term? Is, you know, the cost, and I really think once Jack gives us the number, the costs are going to be pretty much the same, you know, or, you know, minimal difference over 30 years, and impact on students.
Following up on that, like, cost is huge for me. Space and long-term planning that you just brought up is also a thing that we need to talk about, because I got the letter from the young woman who said, we don't even have enough playground space at Christa McCullough to have big kid playground equipment. There's just not that much room. Then I have to look at this and say, okay, so we all have an inkling. You can discuss whether it's going to happen or be down of pre-K, right? Which would require, in my opinion, two different options. One would be we expand the space in elementary schools. Parents want that. There's no room at Christa McCullough. Those kids would have to go Abbott Downing, next closest school. But if we build the middle school there, there's not going to be room there without taking away things. Okay. The other option, we go 5 to 8, something that we've discussed, and it's not something we really like, but it's the other option. 5 to 8 would mean John
I like
really
it.
likes it. We had a discussion. It was a very close vote. 5 to 8 would mean that where we build the middle school has to be able to be expanded to take all of the 5th graders. If we build it at the South Street site, once again, there's not room to be able to do that. So that puts a real question in my mind about that particular site for the future, because we're talking about, you know, 50 years into the future, and there's a lot of people out there would say, Mr. Richards, we're talking 75 to 100. We don't want to pay this much money in that class. So that's something I have a concern about as well as far as space goes. So I'll bring that. Go ahead, Mr. Cobb.
I would just follow up on one thing that Pam said, and that is about the disruption to the students. I mean, there's the disruption that may occur because of the closeness of the construction site. More importantly to me is the extra 18 months that it's going to take to build at the current Runlet site compared to the Broken Ground site. I mean, that's where the real disruption is, I think, and it's hard to get around, at least for me. So, just a thought.
Other thoughts? Go ahead, Mr. Walker.
So since we're talking about different situations that could arise, and we've heard a lot about the environmental implications, say we build at Broken Ground, what if the remaining of the land was donated to a conservation society?
Yeah, what if we threw an easement on it? We could legally do that. I mean, within reason, if we needed to expand, you can't completely void the entire property.
I mean, I guess the question is, and then we wouldn't have a space for, I mean, right now we kept it, we could add a high school there if we needed to, and or somebody else needs to in 100 years or so.
Right.
But I think where our proposal, I mean, I understand where you're going. I think our building there, we're keeping a lot of that land in trails.
No, absolutely. No, just I think, consider all
Yeah.
Yeah.
scenarios.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing to bring up.
That's a good thing to consider.
Other discussion points?
So we have,
Go ahead.
thank you. Sorry. So we have had a number of discussions about CRTC and the future of that program and the fact that it's getting bigger or wants to get bigger and bigger. And we need some places to put some of those programs. And it possibly could be, to answer the question of earlier, that maybe some of the Runlet Middle School, if eventually we are there or aren't there, some of it could be used for CRTC. It'd be a tight fit if we stay there. Perhaps some of the countryside that we have at Broken Ground School could be a future site for some of our CRTC programs. And if we have I'm not saying this is my choice, I'm just saying if we have a building already there, then we have access to an easier, perhaps, build to put CRTC out there as well, some of it,
Out by Broken Ground.
yes.
I was just saying, I straddle the fence completely on this. I have a list of reasons why I think we need to stay right where we are, and they're good reasons, and they're solid reasons, and a lot of people in our community share them. I have a list of reasons in my head why moving makes the most sense, and they're good reasons and solid reasons, and there are people in our community that share those. I think we could go round and round on disruption. Regardless of where we build, the people on that site will be disrupted. So one over the other, in my mind, it's a moot point. Whoever's on that site will have some disruption in their lives because the school is being built outside the window. I think we could heckle back and forth over all of the things that will change or not change. How many kids on a bus? Well, right now they all get bused over here. Now they're just gonna get bused over there. So much of it is equal. I think if I had to bring up one thing, I think we need to really make sure that we are acknowledging and respecting the input of our citizens. And I think we need to not just post meetings and invite them to come. I think a lot of people can't come to these meetings, and I think we need to really reach out and have a much bigger public input. That's just I feel like the parents of students in the school, Brenda and I taught in the district. We both were in the district when the other building projects went along. And so we have a knowledge of what that's like day to day. I think parents with kids in school now, on both sides of the river, in all ages, should really have input into what we do, and that they need to feel that we're listening to them. I mean, I know we invite them, and those can come, but I think a lot of people have a lot to say that aren't here, and I just want to make sure that we're really truly listening to everybody. And then ultimately, kids learn, and regardless of where the building is, they're going to have a wonderful experience. So at the end of the day, I don't really think there's a wrong choice, but I don't know that there's necessarily a right choice either. And I would love to hear more from the people that haven't shared how they feel. So figure out how to get them to share how they feel.
Well, I'm going to jump in and I said, I asked the people in my neighborhood, I asked a lot of people in my neighborhood, because I'm in Ward 3, right? Ward 1, 2, and 3, that's a 40-minute bus ride to Runlet. When someone in our public hearing said, let's keep the middle school in the middle of town, Runlet is nowhere near the middle. It is on the southern edge, right? And
It's a mile from Bo.
it's a long hike. Someone else brought up but there's the late bus. The late bus is a 2-hour trip to get back to that part of that. Those folks, when I ask them what they want, they all pretty much have exactly the same thing. We want you to do the thing that is best for our kids. We don't want them riding 40 minutes. We want the best school with the most opportunities for athletics, for outdoors, for community. I went out, I looked really hard at our public hearings, and I am so glad that we had them and that those people had an opportunity to provide input. But there was one person from Ward 1, 2, or 3 there, right? So we missed that whole thing. And every one of those people are on a bus no matter which site we pick. So So I think we have to I think we should listen to them, and I think Barbara's exactly right. We have to make sure that we're not just getting a limited amount. I mean, quite frankly, I went back in public hearings, were 90% people from Ward 6, 7, or people who lived a half mile away from broken ground. That's hardly 20% of our population. So we really do need to consider that. I think it's our responsibility as board members to consider everybody.
Well, I would say,
I'm sorry.
I would say, what do you suggest? I mean, we've put out the same communication to everyone in the district. We've built a website, we've made flyers. I feel like we've been as accessible as we can be in this, since we started considering Broken Ground as a final location. We have a final vote a week from Wednesday. I don't honestly know what day it is today, I'll be honest, on December 6th. So are you suggesting that we do not have enough input to make a decision on December 6th?
If you're I don't know, I can't speak for Barb, but if you're asking me, we've done what we can, and as individuals, we have to do that on our own, right? But this is not a town meeting. We can't bring 43,000 people together. We are elected representatives, and so in the end, in my opinion, personally, just for me, I'm gonna vote what I think is the best thing that serves all of the community, whether they live in Ward 2 or 1, and go to Concord, school district, or whether they live in Ward 6 and 7, or whether they live in Ward 9 or 10, or any of the others. I think that's the only thing we can do, but I won't speak for you. What do you think?
Well, I also go back to other projects in our city, like the hospital road, which was planned in like the 1930s, and when it all started getting built and everyone got angry because now there's a road in their backyard, it was like it was a new project, and it wasn't. If you look historically at Concord, we bought that land up there when I was 5 to potentially build a high school on it. That's why all of that land was purchased. I was teaching in the district when we redid the high school. Very same thing, keep it where it is. Had we cleared land behind Broken Ground and built a high school out there with a beautiful athletic fields and all this, we wouldn't be worrying about Memorial Field. We have a high school that's on a postage stamp. So there's a lot to be said for getting out of town, so to speak. This is where I lean toward the Broken Ground site, because I look at the limitations of our high school students who have to use city fields, and also there's, I don't know, I just think there's so much to look at and so many opinions that come in. I go back and forth all the time. And half of you are going to be pissed at me when I vote, so that's.
Just lean in.
That's how you do it.
Yeah, it's gonna happen.
No, I agree that, the importance of public opinion, and, I too have been sort of asking everyone who doesn't bring it up to me. I appreciate the passion of the people who have been very devoted and have come to the public hearings, but I also recognize that's a self-selecting group, and you have to balance that with talking to others. During COVID, our public hearings were only people who didn't want vaccines or masks, was the primary people, so you still had to balance that. And I'm not comparing you to anti-vaxxers, I'm sorry. But I'm just saying you gotta balance it. And what the most common feedback I get is just build a damn middle school as quickly as possible and don't drive me out of my home while you do it.
Yeah, money is the big thing.
But why can't you have built this 3 years ago? And it's not because of I try to explain to people, it's not because of the land, we're waiting for the state to fund building aid, but that's the most common that I get from people who, who aren't, even people who live adjacent, literally next door to the site, who would like it to stay there because it's convenient for them. They're like, but at the end of the day, just build something. Please, just build something soon.
Go ahead, Mr. Weber.
No, I agree with what Pam is saying as well, because if we were to delay it past December, that pushes the construction plans all the way back. It pushes it back for the building aid application in the next biennium cycle, and we've already pushed it back multiple times. So I personally wouldn't be in support of moving it again. And also with this discussion, if the Broken Ground site would be selected, and this would not be my choice because I would not be on the board at this time, I like the idea of putting another property on the tax rolls. Like, we understand how Concord has such thin revenue streams, and additional properties on the rolls would help, hopefully, other taxpayers, and hopefully, in the future, the project as well.
I will add one thing about public, is that we just had elections for 3 school board member seats, and the location of the middle school was not really a controversy in most of those campaigns. People had opinions, but, a lot of the candidates were in very similar places. It wasn't,
It wasn't make or break.
it wasn't a make or break driving issue for, which says something to me, if not other people.
Yeah, I'll corroborate what Pam has said. I ask everyone who doesn't bring it up to me, where do you want it? And 99.9% of the people who I am asking say they don't care. It's the least important conversation we're going to have. And that what they do care about is that they don't want to see their property taxes skyrocket, and then they don't even get to access this new middle school because they won't be able to live here anymore. That's like, we do have a very, we have a wide demographic swing in our town. We have very wealthy folks, we have folks who are experiencing poverty. If we continue to just inflate our property taxes, we lose a demographic of people that are really important to this community. I don't want this to be a town that no one can afford to live in, because then I won't be here either. So that really is a driving force for me, is how are we being equitable by making sure that we are being very conscientious about the dollars that we spend everywhere we turn.
And I would say, from these numbers, I forget who said it, but I agree that I think both locations are very similar in cost. And we have 176 million as our number, which is everything in the kitchen sink.
Yes.
Which includes 20 million to buy land that we don't need to, right? Like, it's listed as $20 million for site acquisition and development.
There's more than that in that number, sorry.
That's okay. You're like, no, keep that 20 million. You're like, shh, can't. I feel you. But I'm just saying, like, there are going to be places where we are going to have to negotiate costs. Like,
Trim
this
the fat.
number is going to get trimmed. We are going to have very difficult discussions about that. But in terms of location, I haven't seen anything that's like, this site is so much cheaper. Like, it's...
That's fair.
So I feel like these guys have done an amazing job of giving us apples to apples, so that now when we fight amongst ourselves, we have, the best comparison. I think the timeline, is probably one of the most visually obvious, differences between the two and the resulting phasing costs. But we're also talking about a school that's going to hopefully last, 100 years? Maybe.
Cross your fingers.
Cross your fingers. Yeah. So, we're talking about the disruption of now versus the longevity of that site. I feel like they've shown us spaces or designs that include expansion possibilities at both sites, even though it is technically smaller. Disruption is possible no matter what, and so I do continue to lean on what I am receiving as far as response from the public, which is not only do the folks in my neighborhood want it to stay a neighborhood school, but I hear from people on the east side saying they really don't want the addition of traffic and the unknown over there, and they want to keep their wild spaces. I do think that input is super important.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I just feel like it's hard to say we're not going to take that into consideration.
That's what I'm struggling with right now. It's, I see the benefits of both sites, for lots of different reasons, and I'm having a really hard time sort of putting out of my mind the wishes of the people that have spoke. They've been equally vocal for the people who want it to be at Runlet still, and the people who don't want it at Broken Ground for different reasons. They're both pretty passionate about it, and I just don't feel like, I feel like we did everything we could as a board to get community involvement. And I'm having a hard time saying, well, I know what people are saying they want, but, they're wrong.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel that's how we're viewed sometimes.
Right.
I don't think I'm saying that
No, no.
people here
right.
who are speaking are wrong. I'm just, the neutral, I think, are a bigger component of the community, at least.
And I wish the neutral had spoken up.
Well, but I mean,
They
but
asked us
neutral
to do
is neutral is a choice.
Neutral is a
Neutral's
choice,
like
right.
just build it,
Yeah.
you know. And so if we can build
Doesn't
it,
matter.
then we can tap into the people that are passionate about it, because it's not that we've ignored the people who are neutral; it's that they're just straight up neutral. They're like, hey man, I gotta drive either way.
No, that's not what the people that I was referring to. They trust us. And so, and I get it, right? I appreciate the input of people. I think we need to address those. And I understand, when you've enjoyed a privilege or a benefit for many years, it's hard to give that up. That's not human nature, right? And so the people who have it close is good. The people who didn't pay for a big bunch of trees and trails and all that, but love to enjoy it, right? Don't want to give that up. That's human nature, right? I think we ought to I want to address some of the things that they brought up, because I thought everybody at those meetings brought up great items. You know, one of the ones, and was called out with my name in it today and stuff, is like, you know, hey, the ability to go to the State House, to the White Farm, to the library, or whatever. And the person who brought that up actually lectures us frequently on doing our homework. So I did, right? You can't walk there. That's in a bus. So we're gonna bus the kids to the State House. They currently bus them to White Farm now, for snowshoeing, you know. You can argue that, you know, the broken ground, you go snowshoeing out the back, but let's just say it's busing for this point. I've said, okay, we're busing, so I just went to Google, right? It takes 7 minutes to drive a bus to travel from broken ground to downtown to the State House, right? If you go look at Runlet, it takes 7 minutes, even though it's short, because of congestion and traffic. So it's even. It's even up on that one. So that's, you know, we're not going to get any advantage from one or the other on that particular area. But since we talked about congestion and traffic congestion, that people brought up a lot of things. They said, you know, the school board go to broken ground in the morning and in the afternoon and just take a look at traffic. So I did, right? And I went there in the morning at least 2 different days. I went to the afternoon 2 different days. There is traffic. Whenever school comes in and out, people are driving in and dropping their kids. They're not using buses driving. But I counted and I looked at Curtisville and Portsmouth. And at times people had to wait 45 seconds, 58 seconds, 70 seconds. No one waited very long at all. I drove up Dominique, came back, and got out immediately. They just let me out immediately on that. So I didn't see that slowdown. But then, you know, and then I went to South Street. South Street gets a little crazy in the mornings because of that double lane going through there, but I'm assuming we're going to change that, I hope. So that it's separate there. You know, I said before about people coming from my end of town. From my end of town, you have to go down Fisherville. You have to, and you have the traffic in the morning at 8 o'clock of the prison. You have the traffic in the morning of, you have to come all the way across town, right? You're coming in from, you know, the north side to the south side at the time when all of the people who work up at the state facilities off of Pleasant and Northmore are coming in. It's congestion.
Drive by my house.
It's congestion. You have to drive by
I know
buses,
buses.
so you're congested. So, you know, on those 2 things, you know, where do we fall? Then we had they brought up a really great point of, you know, 395. Walking that bridge across there, because that's on just over the 1 mile part. None of us want that. But at the current Runlet, I took a look. If you're a walker, Center Street, Warren Street, Pleasant Street, all have to be crossed. Then you come to McKee Square. And stand on the corner of McKee Square and look, and stand on the corner of Curtisville and Portsmouth and look. McKee Square is Broadway. You know, I'm not gonna count State, that cuts in later, right? It's Clinton, it's South Street, it's 4 lanes. That makes me nervous too, right, for that. Now, when I said that, Barb said, and I think Brenda both said, well, they've walked over there, and you walked to Runlet because you cut through the state hospital, and you walk right by the state hospital and cut through there. That's the shortcut to go over. In the last 2 weeks, that makes me nervous too, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of, I think traffic is a problem that this board needs to look at all across. The broken ground is nothing as dangerous compared to Beaver Meadow, Beaver Meadow, because people, you know, just their traffic study showed it. It's people come in the wrong way at Millbrook. You know, that was in somebody's letter to the editor. They come in the wrong way at Runway, and they really mess things up at Beaver Meadow and some of the others. And Abbott Downing is really not good either. I hear complaints about that. Traffic is something we need to look at, and I'm glad people brought it up because it is a key item. Outdoor learning. That was one of the big things that our visioning session got from a lot of people. Outdoor learning, I think, is key, right? There are outdoor learning sections in both sites, and I think that is absolutely awesome. But then I start just thinking on my own and say, well, you know what? Kids in middle school don't get out of school until, you know, later, 3:30 or at this time of year. You could be at the telescope, or you could be out with a science class looking at stars out there. You could be in the woods with your, you know, environmental class and looking at that. There are benefits to that, and I have to do it. There are little wetlands you could do at Runlet now too, if you wanted to study some wetlands. So being fair, that would be in there. And then I'm a fan of trees. I'm a tree guy, and we had a lot of people talk about that. And I reached out and I asked that. And I actually talked for a long time. We're going to take 8 acres out of 59 for this project as it's laid out right now. That's 8 acres of trees. I reached out to the Concord Green Space folks who actually don't have an opinion on this one way or the other, and I talked to one of their, actually they reached out to me, and I talked to one of their leaders, and they said, I asked, so where do you stand on, they don't have a preference one way or the other on the middle school. So I said, where do you stand on Monitor Way? Right? Most of the people in the southern part of this city don't always know about Monitor Way. Monitor Way is where the Concord Monitor is. They're going to build 900 units in there, taking most of 100 acres of trees alongside of the pristine river where people fish. And they said, well, you know what, development is going to occur. They're not against that at this point. And what they promote is, you know, thoughtful development, right? Correct. And that's there's a lot of wisdom in that. And so I would say we need, you know, development and taking down trees at this location should be thoughtful, but it shouldn't be necessarily off the table. And I think one of the things I come back to is something Sarah said a few meetings ago, which is, you know, here is a great opportunity to teach. Here's a great opportunity that if we build it at the Broken Ground site, to teach stewardship of the forest, stewardship of land, and to do things, you know, that preserve the wildlife as well as the land. So, you know, right now it sounds like I'm coming down on the side of broken ground. And maybe I am, because I haven't really made my decisions yet. I'm still listening to lots and lots of people. But I come back to the two things that I said at the beginning. What is the best for all of our students, no matter where they live? And what is the best for our taxpayers who are going to have to foot this bill? And so in the end, that's where I'm going to make my decision.
I'm curious.
So I
if
hope
Jack
I
has
hit
come
all
up
the
with our
things
number
that
yet.
people wrote to us about, because I tried to list them all in here. trying to think, growth. Growth I asked about too. Growth is wards 1 and 2, and a little bit on the other side of the river. Not growth is the center of the city at this point, but if they start building, high-rise, multi-family developments down here, maybe that will be changed. But right now, that's where it is. I hope I hit most of the things that people wrote me about or that talked about. Go ahead.
Thank you for that passionate and detailed.
Well, I think we owe them an answer. I don't like to sit here and listen to people with not answering.
Yes, I feel you. Yeah, I did, and I feel like I just would think that Concord Green Space would want me to correct the record slightly. They have advocated for rebuilding at Runlet. Most recently, they have said Concord Green Space echoes the voices of the Concord community in advocating for rebuilding the middle school at Runlet's current site.
Okay, that's very recent, because I think that's very extremely recent. And, that's good. They're
And I think that they remained neutral for a while we were figuring out what to do, because Clinton Street was taken off the table. That was something that they advocated against. They wanted to rebuild at Runlet. Clinton was off the table. Then Broken Ground came in to the discussion, and they wanted to give it time. And they are basically saying the community has spoken. The majority of voices that they have heard in the community would like to rebuild at Runlet, and therefore they are advocating for that decision.
mostly those with Ward 6, 7, the downtown voices.
I mean, it's the voices that they feel that they have heard from.
That they represent.
They've done a really good job of reaching out to folks on my side
I
of the
agree.
river as well.
Good.
Yeah, they've made a very conscientious effort of being inclusive,
Yeah.
which I really appreciate about the work that they do.
I agree.
Yeah, I hope they jump in there and keep the river good up in the northern part of our city as well. So I guess I'm trying to think, go ahead.
Just wondering if Jack came up with a number
Yep.
for us.
Yeah, so this is assuming state building aid, okay? So remember, you're at 176 million. All they did was take 40% and give it, that leaves you with a balance of 600,000, assuming everything was allowable, okay? The additional that you would pay in taxes in year one is $276 on a $300,000 home.
For the year.
That's for year one. And then every year after that, the debt goes down, because that's the way we structure the debt. Now, that is assuming, again, the 176 million, 40%, all of it's fully funded by the state, that differential. So the 105.6 would be, again, $276 in the first year on a $300,000 home.
So is that the premium for rebuilding at Runlet, or do you have, the question I was asking is
Yep.
the differential between, like, you take this $5.25
Oh,
million dollars, you
if I-
amortize it over 30 years.
I got you.
What is the cost
Okay,
to taxpayers? Just,
yep.
Dance, Jack.
I am dancing on that because I gotta figure out what I would look at in. Let's see. Okay, all right. Give me another minute. I
While
can
he's
rough it.
thinking of that, there's one other term, Jim, and you did a great job there. Thank you so much. There's one other thing that's been kind of tossed around out there, and that I've heard from folks, is that Runlet, the current site of Runlet is a neighborhood school. And I don't know if I'm missing something, but it doesn't feel to me that physically located where it is, that it's truly a neighborhood school. I mean, it may be in a neighborhood of other little schools, but there's an awful lot of, well, I shouldn't probably go out too far on a limb out there, but I'd like to know the demographics of the number of children that come from within a real small area around that neighborhood, and the greater population of 46,000 people in the city of Concord.
Well, Tom, I think you touch upon a point, though, that it's not a neighborhood school also. It's a citywide school.
Right.
And I think that's an important item to note,
Yeah.
that the school
And what
will-
we want to build is a
Yeah.
citywide school.
Yeah.
You know.
And even if it were at the Broken Ground, it would not be a neighborhood school there either, because that would not be the intention of this school.
So Tom, to answer your question, because I was involved a little bit with the census stuff, each ward is is very, very close to 10% of our population.
Oh, okay.
Right, it's designed intentionally to be that, so wards, 5, 6, and 7 are 30% of the population. Wards 1, 2, and 3 are close to 30% of the population. It's a little iffy. in
But if you
3.
drew a circle around the middle school building, and you'd get perhaps one in a partial, another part of a ward.
Yeah, so walking distance, which was to me what would maybe make a school a neighborhood school, you can walk to it. If you did a 1.5 mile, that's the distance, right? 1.5 miles and they get a bus. So it was 2 miles when I was growing up, so I missed the bus by one street. It was a long walk, but that's okay. Uphill both ways, always snowing. But if you drew a circle around Runlet, 1.5 mile radius, that's the neighborhood that can call Runlet a neighborhood school. Anything outside of that is driven or qualifies for a bus, and in my mind, that makes it now a regional school and not a neighborhood school.
But that's a distance, you said it yourself. I mean, I lived in the 1.5 mile outside. I missed a 2 mile by one street, and it's a long hike. That's not my neighborhood.
No, and I didn't feel it was mine either.
Okay.
It was White's Park.
I just,
Yeah, and just to.
to Jonathan's point, I think well taken that it's a citywide school that we're trying to create, whether it be at South Street or at Broken Ground.
Well, and the people that live in the actual neighborhood where these schools exist, their words matter. Of course the South Enders want the school to stay there because it's a piece of the fabric of their neighborhood. It's comfortable, it's familiar, it works. So if the people in the neighborhood where the middle school would be built in Broken Ground, if those people feel that it would be a wonderful part of their neighborhood, we need to listen to that. We also need to listen to if they don't. And I think that's where Brett and I feel similar in the sense that, everyone's voice matters here. And people that live far away from both. It's probably not a super short bus ride from your house to the new middle school either. Probably less because it's Mountain Road. It would be back roads.
That would be about half from the
so
areas
time
up
wise,
there.
yeah.
But,
So, there's all of those things. It's just different kids would now have to be bused, and that changes things.
To put more facts on the table, and this is one that I asked too, is walkability. Walkability is something people talked about. They did say less than, although that 1.5 miles in there,
Yeah.
less than 10% of the students actually walk or bike to Runlet on the best days.
Right.
They're all being driven, either in a bus or in a car. And we had a person, I believe, I won't say who it was, but he told us, he says, that's not even true because the truth is, and he lived there, he says, we drop off, parents drive close but don't want to wait in line and just drop their kids off on the street somewhere, which makes me a little nervous on that as well. So even that is high, especially post-COVID, but even before. People are getting driven to school, and that kind of brings me back to where, regardless, somewhere after this decision and all, we need to talk about traffic and safety and the traffic pattern in there, because much as I want people to walk and take the bus, I don't know that they are. Other points that people want to talk about?
I think Jack has the numbers.
Yeah.
Jack, you got the numbers
So
for
I
us?
took the 5 million, assuming 30 years, which is the original bond, and I just doubled the 5 million to 10 million, because that's typically what you pay if you look at your home and you finance 30 years, it's double. So that would add $21, or the first year would be $297 versus $276.
Confused. I am confused,
Can
but
you
that's
explain that?
okay. I'm
What's that?
Doing it again.
Can you just?
Run
Oh,
the
yeah.
number again.
So I took 5 million as the premium, right? That's what Pam asked. I just doubled it to 10 million, because with interest, that's what it's gonna be, and I divided it by 30.
I see.
So roughly 5.4%, you pay 5.4% more on the State Street site versus the, if you take 291 and 276 and compare them.
I guess presuming demolition.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Don't.
Other discussion points? Other things we want from our esteemed consultants or architects? other things we want from other places, safety, the city, anything?
I really would encourage us to start talking with the city as soon as possible, because we've made some assumptions here about
Good
their
call, Brenda.
involvement
Yeah,
that might or might not be accurate.
they've got a big enough meeting coming up on the 11th.
Yes, they do.
Different topic.
But I'm just saying, but it's the same wallet.
Yeah,
We're
the same
asking for
impact.
all
Yeah.
of these things from the same group of people. I don't care that we have an autonomous school district. Everybody's paying for everything.
As we say, different
You know?
group, same impact. Same-
Exactly.
Same buyers or same payers.
Yeah.
But I do think that as members of the school board, that we should be advocating for what we think is necessary for the community. It's not
Totally agree.
You know, like
Yeah.
obviously it's everybody is paying into different buckets for different things that they need in their city, and our job is to advocate for what
For
the,
the
school
district.
district needs.
Yes.
So obviously we want to keep costs down, but also if we're comparing it to other projects, I would hesitate to do that because I think we need to focus on what is important to us.
Good points.
I think compare and coordinated with Pam is, I think we're all in agreement, we need a middle school.
Can we get one like
Oh, yeah.
tomorrow? Can we just do it tomorrow?
Yeah.
If we choose tonight, can
If
we
you
get one
guys
tomorrow?
don't have a genie in a bottle, then I don't have any other requests from you. I would love 3 wishes.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other things? All right,
Well,
Thank you.
go ahead.
I'm not sure how much we want to discuss of this, but I know there have been a lot of comments made about why was South Curtisville and Broken Ground chosen just now, since we've owned it for years. And but it's always been under deliberation as a potential choice, as along with so many other locations. So it wasn't just recently that the school board started investigating, and I think that's an important aspect to note, because I know for some community members it seemed that this was an abrupt kind of choice, but it has been an ongoing conversation.
At least, yeah, at least since 2017.
Yeah.
Other comments?
Well, I think it was a conversation in 95
Yeah.
or before then. Quite frankly, there was some we're fortunate that we had some very forward-thinking folks in this district back then that took the initiative and had the farsightedness.
So before anybody jumps in and says move to adjourn or any of that stuff, we've had some people who think, and we've had discussions here tonight too, about working harder and soliciting additional public input. And some people have asked for another, public hearing. I don't know, we're not necessarily looking for the same people that spoke to us before to talk, but there is a call. Does anybody have an interest to discuss that or anything like that between now and Wednesday? Is it Wednesday?
We don't have time.
Well, I guess we either set time Wednesday, or we assume that Monday's meeting will be a lot of public, and I'm fine with that, we have public comment on Monday, and we can have that, maybe consider a longer public comment session on Monday.
I'm sorry, I was under the assumption that Wednesday would have a public hearing component. Does it currently
Well, we
not
have it
in our
not.
format?
We haven't said that, but
Okay.
that would
I would
have it in the same location and not in a different location of the city.
I mean, it's central office, you know? Uh-oh, she's pulling the mic closer.
I'm trying to, you have a meeting on the Wednesday, December 6th. It's a regular school board meeting. And with that comes the opportunity
Public
for
comment.
public comment. And I think that people should feel that they can use that evening before you make that decision, and that's totally the agenda for that night. Also on your agenda for Monday night, which is the 4th, which is your regular board meeting, you have 2 more opportunities, middle of the meeting and then again at the end, should all the time be not used, to have public comment. I think
Yes.
people
Yes.
have expressed a desire to do that. So you do have time to do that without adding another night and, posting notice and
Yeah.
all of that. I
We don't
think
have time for that.
you have it built in already.
Yeah, no, I know we have public comment on Monday, and I assumed some before decision on.
I would agree.
On Wednesday. Does anybody think we need additional other than that?
Everyone can find our emails on the website. You can also find our phone numbers. It's all public information. If you feel like you have not been heard yet, that's why you elected us. Please email us or call us.
Yeah. I will point that out too, because it's always a question, is that people say, well, the school board just makes this decision. We're elected representatives, just like the city council. We were chosen by the people in an election, so it's just like city council. It's a little different than the way others, locations do it, because they're not the state capital, but we do answer to the public. So, okay. Any other business, superintendent?
Fine, thank you.
Very good. Any other business from the board?
Thank you to the architects.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, team.
Thank you to the people who come and listen to, and to the people, as I said earlier, who have participated, who email us, who talk to us in the grocery store and everything else. So we really appreciate that in making our decisions. With that,
Motion to adjourn?
motion is
Second.
adjourned, seconded by Mr. Weinberg. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, everyone. It was a good meeting. We're adjourned.